Hey guys, today we're going to answer the question, how do I write linear equations from all three forms? So the first thing you always need to write a linear equation is slope, which might require you doing slope formula or rise over run if you're on a graph. Then once you have a slope and a point, you can write your equation in point slope form, which is y minus the y value of the point equals m the slope times x minus the x value of your point. Then you can convert it to slope-intercept form, where m is the slope and b is the y-intercept, and y equals mx plus b. And then we can convert that to standard form by moving x to be on the same side of the equation as y, and then just making sure that a is a positive whole number. So let's start with this first one. It says, find the slope and write a linear equation in all three forms for a line that goes through -4, 24 and 6, -6. So the very first thing that I will need to find is the slope of these 2 points. So I'm going to label my points x1, y1, x2, and y2, and now I'm going to do y2, which is -6 minus y1, which is 24, all over x2, which is 6, minus x1, which is -4. And -6 minus 24 is -30, and 6 minus -4 is the same thing as 6 plus 4, so 10. And -30 divided by 10 is -3. So I found my slope. It is -3. Okay, now that I have my slope and I have 2 points, I can write the equation in point slope form. I have the slope and I have 2 points. I'm just going to use this first point to write it in point slope form. So it'll be y minus y1, or y minus 24, equals the slope of -3 times x minus x1, and minus -4 I can instead write more simply as plus 4. So there's the equation in point slope form. And now I want to convert this to slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b. So I'm going to solve my point slope form equation for y. So the first thing I'm going to do is distribute that -3, and I get y minus 24 equals -3x minus 12. And the last thing I need to do to get y by itself is add 24. And I get y equals -3x, and then -12 plus 24 is 24. So there's the equation in slope-intercept form. And now finally I want to convert my equation to standard form. So I just need x and y on the same side, and I need to make sure that a is a positive whole number. So the only thing I need to do to convert this equation to standard form is add 3x. And now my equation is in proper standard form. 3x plus y equals 24. Okay, let's look at the next one. It wants me to find the slope and write a linear equation in all three forms for a line that goes through the points shown in the table below. So first thing I need to find is the slope. I can use any 2 points for slope. I'm going to use these middle two since I have 0. That's usually an easier number to work with, and those are positive numbers. A lot of people just use the first 2 points. That would have worked as well, but I just chose to avoid those negatives since I could. Okay, so let's plug into slope formula if I can get my screen correct. Okay, so it'll be m equals y2 minus y1, which will be 10 minus 0, all over x2 minus x1, so 4 minus 2. So it'll be 10 over 2 for my slope, which is 5. So the slope of this line is 5. Now I need to write my equation in point slope form. You can use any point from the table. I'm going to use this point for 10 this time. So my equation in point slope form will be y minus the y value of 10 equals the slope I just found of 5 times x minus the x value of 4. So there's my equation in point slope form. And now I'm going to convert this to slope-intercept form by solving for y. So first thing I'm going to do is distribute the 5, and I get y minus 10 equals 5x minus 20. And then I'm going to add 10, and I get y equals 5x, and then negative 20 plus 10 is negative 10. So there's my equation in slope-intercept form, and now I'm going to convert to standard form by moving the x to be on the same side as the y. So I'll subtract 5x from both sides, and I get negative 5x plus y equals negative 10. And then this is almost in standard form. The only reason it's not yet is because a, the number in front of x, is negative. So I'm going to multiply this whole equation by a negative 1, basically just change the sign of everything in the equation, and that will make it in proper standard form. And I get 5x minus y equals positive 10 for this standard form. Okay, let's look at number 3. It says, find the slope and write a linear equation in all 3 forms for the graphed line on the grid. So the first thing I need to find is the slope, which on a graph I find slope by doing rise over run between 2 perfect points. So I'm going to find 2 perfect points. There's one right there and one right there. There's my slope triangle, and it looks like I go up 2 over 3. So my slope is 2/3. And then to write my equation in point slope form, I need a point. You can use any point on the line to write your equation in point slope form. I'm going to use this point right here, which is negative 3, negative 4. So negative 3 will be x1 and negative 4 will be y1. So now I'm ready to write my equation in point slope form. It'll be y minus y1, so minus negative 4 would be plus 4, equals the slope of 2/3 times x minus negative 1, so x plus 3. There's my point slope form equation. Okay, now I need to write it in slope-intercept form, so I could convert this point slope form equation to slope-intercept form like I have on the last 2 problems, or I can just look for the y-intercept. I can look for b since I was given the graph here, and it looks like b is negative 2. So now I have everything I need to write the equation in slope-intercept form. I have the slope of 2/3 and the y-intercept of negative 2. So my equation in slope-intercept form would be y equals 2/3 x minus 2. And last thing I need to do is convert this equation to standard form. And I'll do that by moving the x to be the same side as the y. So I'm going to subtract 2/3 x. And I get negative 2/3 x plus y equals negative 2. And the last thing I need to do to convert this equation to standard form is make that a positive whole number. It is negative and a fraction right now. So I'm going to multiply by a negative 3, because negative 2/3 times negative 3 becomes a positive 2x. And then y times negative 3 is negative 3y, and negative 2 times negative 3 is 6. So there's the equation in standard form. Okay, last one says write the slope and write a linear equation in all 3 forms for a line that goes through f of negative 4 equals 1 and f of negative 12 equals 1. So they gave us the points in kind of a strange way here, but they still gave us the 2 points, which is all we need to find the slope. Remember, inside the parentheses is x, so this is x1, and then it's telling us that when you input negative 4 to that function, you're going to output your y value of negative 1. So there's our x1 and y1, and that makes negative 12 x2 and 1 y2. So now that I have that straight, I can find my slope by plugging into slope formula. It'll be y2, so 1 minus y1, so minus negative 1, all over x2, which is negative 12, minus x1, which was negative 4. So 1 minus negative 1 is the same thing as 1 plus 1 or 2. And then negative 12 minus negative 4 is the same thing as negative 12 plus 4, which is negative 8. And 2 over negative 8 simplifies to negative 1/4. So there's our slope. It's negative 1/4. And now I can write my equation in point slope form. I'm just going to use the first point. So it'll be y minus y1, so y plus 1, equals our slope of negative 1/4 times x minus negative 4, or x plus 4. So there's my point slope form equation. Now I'm going to convert it to slope-intercept form. So it'll be y plus 1 equals, I'm going to distribute the negative 1/4. Negative 1/4 times x is negative 1/4 x. And negative 1/4 times 4 is negative 1. And then to get the y by itself, I would subtract 1. And I get y equals negative 1/4 x minus 2 for the slope-intercept form equation. And the last thing I need to do is convert it to standard form. So I'm going to add 1/4 x to move it to be with the y. And I get 1/4 x plus y equals negative 2. And I'm going to multiply all of this by a 4 to make that a value positive. 4 times 1/4 x is just x. 4 times y is 4y. And then 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. So there's our equation in standard form.